October 1636. The charred, smoking remains of a Pequot village on the banks of the Mystic River. The scent of burnt thatch and blackened earth hangs thick in the cold air, but another smell is beginning to overtake it, the coppery, sickly sweet odor of blood. You are not standing in a simple conflict between colonists and natives. You are witnessing the brutal, calculated birth of a colony, and the moment Connecticut's future was forged in fire and terror. Listen. You can hear the distant, panicked shouts from the Pequot fort a mile upriver. Inside the English palisade at Saybrook, Captain John Underhill, a professional soldier with a trimmed beard and cold eyes, checks the flint of his matchlock musket. His counterpart, Captain John Mason, a man of puritanical certainty, kneels in prayer, but his hand rests on the hilt of his sword. They are not farmers praying for a good harvest. They are military commanders, and their target is the entire Pequot nation. The catalyst was the death of a rogue English trader, a convenient pretext, but the real cause is control. Control of the fertile river valleys, control of the wampum trade, the region's currency, control of a coastline. For decades, the Pequot had been the dominant power, a network of villages and tributaries holding sway over what would become southern New England. Their sachem, Sassacus, commanded respect and fear. The English of the Connecticut River towns, Hartford, Wethersfield, Windsor, saw them not as neighbors, but as the primary obstacle to their expansion. The Dutch to the south had already made their move, weakening the Pequot. Now the English, allied with the Pequot's ancient rivals the Narragansett and Mohegan, prepared to deliver the final blow. This was a war of annihilation, not for territory alone, but for supremacy. The future of a continent was being decided in these wet woods, and the rules of engagement were about to be rewritten with a brutality that would echo for centuries. The stage is set. Mason and Underhill have their orders from the colonial authorities, subdue the Pequot. But subdue is a flexible term. As they muster their 70 English soldiers and hundreds of native allies, the objective hardens into something darker, something definitive. They will not merely defeat an army. They will erase a people from the land, to send a message so horrifying that no other tribe would dare challenge the Connecticut experiment. The attack will come not at the stronghold where Sassacus waits, but at the village of Mississtuck, the place of the great river. The women, children, and elders are there. Mason and Underhill know this. They load their muskets, check their powder horns, and prepare to march into the pre-dawn darkness. Connecticut's untold history begins not with a treaty or a prayer, but with a planned massacre. May 26, 1637. The pre-dawn chill clings to the forest as the combined force of English and Narragansett warriors moves like a shadow through the territory of their Mohegan guides. You are moving with them. The only sounds the crunch of frost underfoot and the ragged breath of men anticipating violence. Captain John Mason leads with a grim, set jaw. His pious certainty is armor against doubt. Captain John Underhill, the professional, scans the trees with a tactical coldness. They have bypassed the main Pequot fort at Wineshocks. Their target is softer, more terrible, the fortified village at Mystic, where the heart of the Pequot nation beats in the bodies of its women, children, and elderly. As the first gray light filters through the trees, you see the high, circular palisade. Inside, over 400 Pequot sleep, believing their warriors have the English contained far to the west. Mason gives the signal. The English rush the two entrances. The silence shatters into chaos, barking dogs, shouting men, the first musket blasts roaring in the confined space. But the Pequot fight back with ferocious desperation. Warriors grab weapons, elders throw pots and tools. The English assault, meant to be swift, bogs down in hand-to-hand combat within the crowded village lanes. Mason and Underhill lock eyes across the tumult. The plan is failing. They are outnumbered inside the enemy's walls. In this moment, a tactical decision is made that will crystallize into a lasting American doctrine. Mason bellows an order that changes everything. We must burn them. You see the first thatch torch caught from a hearth, see it arc onto a roof. The dry bark and reed ignite with a hungry whoosh. A second torch follows, then a third. Fire, the great terror, becomes the weapon of choice. Flames leap from wigwam to wigwam with terrifying speed, creating an inferno within the palisade. The English soldiers now fall back to the exits, not to flee, but to form a killing cordon. Their muskets and swords are no longer for combat, but for slaughter. As Pequot men, women, and children, their skin and hair alight, burst from the flames seeking escape, they are cut down at the gates. The Narragansett allies, hardened warriors themselves, watch in stunned horror. They later say the burning was too furious and slays too many. The attack lasts less than an hour. By sunrise, the Mystic Fort is a smoldering pyre. Of the 400-700 Pequot inside, only a handful survive. The English lose 2 men. The message is sent, written in ash and blood. Resistance means extinction. Connecticut is secured not by outposting but by terror. The surviving Pequot, including Sassacus, flee westward hunted. The Mystic Massacre is not the end of the war but its turning point. It establishes a precedent, total war against civilian populations to break the spirit of a nation. The colony's founding is complete, but its soul is scarred by the flames of Mystic. The land is now unequivocally theirs, but the methods have sown a dark, enduring seed. August 1687. A tense, sweat-drenched silence hangs over the council chamber in Hartford. The air is thick with the smell of wool, waxed paper, and anxiety. Sir Edmund Andros, the newly appointed governor of the Dominion of New England, stands imperiously before the assembled leaders of the Connecticut colony. His redcoat soldiers flank the doors, their polished musket barrels glinting in the lamplight. On the table between them lies the physical soul of Connecticut, its royal charter of 1662, a parchment granting the colony remarkable self-governance. Andros has orders from King James II to seize it, to dissolve this rebellious government into his centralized, authoritarian dominion. You are in the room. You can see the defiant set of Colonel John Talcott's jaw, the nervous flicker in Deputy Governor Robert Treat's eyes. For hours, the debate has raged, a war of words and legalities. Andros, impatient, finally declares the discussion over. The charter, he states, is hereby forfeit. He demands its immediate surrender. The colonial leaders cornered play their only card, delay. They argue, they protest, they cite obscure legal precedent. As the argument reaches its peak, something miraculous happens. The heavy iron lanterns on the table are suddenly, accidentally knocked over. The chamber plunges into instant, profound darkness. In the chaotic, shouted confusion that follows, a confusion you can feel pressing in around you, hands move with purpose. You hear the faint, frantic scrape of wood on wood, the rustle of parchment, not from the table, but from near the feet of a man named Captain Joseph Wadsworth. When the candles are relit, the charter is gone. Andros is furious, sputtering accusations, but the document has vanished into the Hartford night. The soldiers search but find nothing. The colonists offer only innocent, bewildered faces. What Andros doesn't know, what you now witness from the shadows outside, is the swift, desperate journey of that parchment. Wadsworth, his heart hammering against his ribs, slips through back alleys, across moonlit fields, to a massive, ancient white oak tree on the property of the Willis family. In its hollow, a cavity known only to a trusted few, he hides the colony's soul. The charter oak becomes more than a tree. It is a vault, a symbol, a secret. For 2 years, under Andros' tyrannical rule, a period of heavy taxation and revoked rights, Connecticut's government operates in shadow, its legitimacy literally rooted in the earth, its leaders guided by the memory of the document in the oak. This isn't just a tale of clever trickery. It is the story of a colony learning to defy authority, to hold its sovereignty so dear it would risk treason to protect a piece of paper. The spirit of rebellion nurtured here is not with muskets and fire, but with secrecy and civic cunning. When the glorious revolution of 1688 topples James II and Andros is overthrown, the charter is triumphantly retrieved from the oak. Connecticut emerges not just restored, but emboldened, its identity forged in an act of clandestine defiance that will whisper to future generations. September 5, 1761. The wharves of New London Harbor thrum with a frantic, muscular energy. The air is a pungent cocktail of salt, tar, sweat, and the sweet, rotten scent of molasses. You are not on a quiet Puritan street. You are in the booming epicenter of Connecticut's true 18th century power, its ports. Before you, the schooner Fortune rides low in the water, its hold being emptied by crews of stevedores. They roll out casks of rum from the West Indies, not for local taverns, but for redistribution. This is the lifeblood of a complex and morally ambiguous machine. Follow the dockmaster Elias Haskins as he checks his ledger under a canvas awning. His ink-stained finger runs down a list. Rum, molasses, sugar, lumber, livestock, and sundry manufactures. The ledger tells a sanitized story. The deeper truth is spoken in the coded language of merchants and the three-way routes etched on their sea charts. Connecticut, with its long coastline and desperate lack of cash crops, had perfected a system. Its farms produced surplus onions, horses, and lumber. Its forges and workshops turned out clocks, nails, and cheap trinkets. But its most valuable export was its seafaring ruthlessness. This is the triangle trade, Connecticut style. A ship like the Fortune would carry local goods to the West Indies, trading them for molasses and sugar. That molasses would be distilled into potent rum in Connecticut's own distilleries. New London and Norwich were famed for it. But to complete the triangle, to acquire the capital to buy more molasses, a third leg was often necessary. You hear the ship's captain, a hardened man named Jeremiah Trumbull, speak in low tones with Haskins. They discuss the market for prime adult males on the plantations of Barbados and the creditworthiness of a factor in Kingston. They are not talking about livestock. Connecticut ships and Connecticut rum were directly financing and fueling the slave trade. The colony's sundry manufactures included the fitted-out vessels and the trade goods used to purchase human beings on the African coast. Its prosperity, funding the elegant homes of merchants in New London and the endowment of its fledgling Yale College, was subtly but inextricably tied to the Middle Passage. This was the colony's open secret. While its Puritan ancestors had fought the Pequot with fire, its merchant princes waged a quieter, more economically devastating war, binding the fortunes of a nascent American state to the cruelest commerce of the age. The wealth that would later fund revolutions and industries was, in part, distilled from suffering. July 8, 1741. The town green in Enfield is a sea of tense, expectant humanity under a blistering sun. The scent of trampled grass and unwashed bodies is overwhelming. You are pressed in the crowd, shoulder to shoulder with farmers, merchants, and their families, all eyes fixed on the makeshift pulpit, a simple wagon. Upon it stands a slight, feverish man with piercing eyes, the Reverend James Davenport. He is not a quiet Puritan divine. He is a firebrand of the Great Awakening, and he is about to tear the soul of Connecticut in two. For weeks, Davenport has been traveling the colony, following the seismic footsteps of George Whitefield, preaching a doctrine of new light. He doesn't just ask for piety. He demands a visceral, emotional, personal conversion. He condemns the established old light clergy, the educated moderate ministers of the Congregational Standing Order, as dead-hearted Pharisees and blind guides. His voice, raw and cracking with passion, slices through the humid air. "You are all halfway covenant hypocrites," he shrieks, pointing at the stunned, respectable faces in the front rows. "You think your baptism and your town covenants save you? You must be born again in a tempest of the Spirit." As he speaks, you see the reactions fracture the crowd. A young woman near you begins to weep uncontrollably. A man cries out as if physically stricken. Others, their faces stony with outrage, are the town's selectmen and the local minister, Reverend Benjamin Pomeroy. To them, this is chaos. This is a direct assault on social order, on the very idea that church and state in Connecticut are one seamless, governing authority. Davenport isn't just saving souls. He's inciting a rebellion against the colony's own ruling class. This religious fervor is the mask for a profound social and political shift. The new lights are often the poor, the disenfranchised, those on the frontier who feel neglected by the wealthy, comfortable elites of the coastal and river valley towns. The awakening gives them a voice and a framework to reject established power. It breeds a radical individualism. If you can experience God directly without a learned minister as interpreter, why do you need a distant colonial assembly to govern you? The movement splits towns, divides congregations, and creates a new, defiant identity. In the aftermath of Davenport's sermon, as the crowd disperses into arguing, weeping clusters, the fissure is set. The Great Awakening does more than revive religion. It psychologically prepares Connecticut for revolution. It teaches people to question authority, to form new communities based on shared fervor rather than geography or law, and to embrace the language of righteous defiance. The war for America's soul begins not on a Lexington green, but here, on the trampled greens of Connecticut, where a mad prophet unleashed a storm of spirit that eroded the foundations of the old world. September 6, 1775. The dusty armory yard in New Haven reeks of coal smoke, hoarse sweat, and the sharp, acidic tang of fear. You are following the frantic, limping gait of Captain Benedict Arnold, his face grimed with soot and resolve. He is not yet the archetype of treason. He is Connecticut's most aggressive, industrious patriot, and he is trying to single-handedly forge an army from nothing. Around him, in a scene of organized chaos, blacksmiths hammer red-hot metal, carpenters saw planks for gun carriages, and boy apprentices run with bundles of finished musket cartridges. This is Arnold's personal war machine, funded in large part by his own dwindling fortune and the credit of his long-suffering sister, Hannah. Just weeks prior, Arnold had watched his hard-won, Connecticut-recruited troops be absorbed into the nascent Continental Army outside Boston. He was denied command. The slight burns in him, a fire alongside his undeniable patriotic zeal. Now he has a new, audacious plan, an invasion of Canada, and he knows the key is Quebec. To take it, he needs a navy. Here, on the banks of the slow-moving West River, miles from the sea, he is building it. You see the skeletal ribs of gunboats taking shape, flat-bottomed bateaus designed to navigate the treacherous rapids of the northern wilderness. Every nail, every oakum seal, every swivel gun is a testament to Arnold's furious will. But look closer at the faces in the yard. The master shipwright is skeptical, constantly checking Arnold's promissory notes. The militiamen, farmers, and craftsmen all eye their commander with a mix of awe and apprehension. They have heard the stories of his bravery at Ticonderoga, but also of his volcanic temper and profound pride. Arnold drives them relentlessly, his voice a constant crack of command. He is creating the instrument of his ambition, but the process is etching deep lines of resentment in others and in himself. He believes with every fiber that his merit and sacrifice are not just unmatched, but unappreciated by the political leaders in Philadelphia and his rivals from other colonies. This scene in New Haven is the crucible of the traitor-to-be. It is where the essential combustible elements of Benedict Arnold are fused: breathtaking competence, immense personal risk, and a bottomless well of perceived grievance. The enterprise is a stunning, patriotic feat. He will lead this makeshift fleet and his men on a horrific march through the Maine wilderness that will become legendary for its suffering. Yet the very drive that makes him a revolutionary hero, the willingness to spend his own money to ignore doubters to act decisively, contains the seeds of his betrayal. He is already keeping a mental ledger of his sacrifices versus his rewards. Connecticut in this moment is not just supplying soldiers to the revolution. It is forging, and soon will reject, its most tragically brilliant son. November 12, 1843. The pre-dawn fog clings to the steep, wooded walls of the Naugatuck Valley, but it cannot muffle the sound. A deep, shuddering thrum pulses through the very stone, a mechanical heartbeat felt in the chest before it's heard by the ears. You are in Waterbury, the brass city, and the bell is tolling not from a church steeple but from the factory clock tower. It is 4:45 a.m. Doors open on cramped boarding houses, and a river of people, men, women, and most hauntingly, children as young as 9, pours into the sulphurous gloom. Follow a slight figure, a girl of 11 named Mary, her face pale even in the darkness. She wraps a threadbare shawl tighter as she joins the current flowing toward the immense, brick-walled Scoville Manufacturing Company. The air, once clean with the scent of pine and river water, now carries the perpetual stench of coal smoke, hot metal, and acid used for etching. This is Connecticut's new engine, not ships or sermons but industry, and it runs on the cheap, pliable labor of the vulnerable. Inside, the noise is a physical assault. The rolling mills scream as they flatten brass ingots. The stamping presses pound with a deafening, rhythmic concussion. Mary takes her place at a polishing bench, her small hands already scarred and nicked. For the next 12 hours, she will breathe air thick with metallic dust, guiding unfinished brass button blanks against spinning wheels charged with emery. She has a quota. The man pacing the aisles is not a master craftsman but an overseer, a timekeeper, stopwatch in hand. The water that once powered sawmills now drives turbines that drive machines that dictate the pace of human life. Connecticut's early 19th century transformation was breathtaking. From clocks and guns in the north, to textiles in the east, to brass and silverware here in the Naugatuck Valley, the state became America's workshop. This industry funded grand mansions on Waterbury's hillside, libraries, and railroads. But the foundation of that progress, as you witness in the exhausted, dust-caked face of young Mary, was a brutal social contract. Child labor was not an anomaly, it was a system. Orphans from New York almshouses, entire families from failing farms, newly arrived Irish immigrants, they were the fuel. The polished buttons Mary makes will adorn the uniforms of the nation's military and the waistcoats of its gentlemen. The brass will become shell casings, the clocks will regulate a continent's time, the Colt revolvers from Hartford will win the West. But in this valley, progress has a taste. It tastes of brass dust and exhaustion. The Puritan work ethic has been mechanized, stripped of its soul, and bent to the relentless rhythm of the steam engine. The community of the town meeting has been replaced by the hierarchy of the factory floor. Connecticut is building the future, one cheaply made component at a time, and the human cost is written in the ledgers as simply another line item. July 15, 1916. The waters of Long Island Sound off the coast of New London are unnaturally still under a blanket of humid summer heat. Aboard the tugboat GWB Mackenzie, you stand beside a man whose intense gaze is fixed on a bizarre, cigar-shaped silhouette being towed behind them. He is Simon Lake, eccentric inventor and tireless rival to John Philip Holland. The silhouette is one of his prototype submarines, the Defender. This isn't a Navy exercise, it's a desperate sales pitch. World War I rages in Europe, and the market for undersea warfare has never been hotter. The air smells of salt, diesel, and ambition. Suddenly, the placid scene erupts. A colossal geyser of white water erupts ahead of the tug, followed by the deafening crump of an explosion. The tug shudders, men shout, and Lake grabs the rail, his face alight not with fear but with furious understanding. A German U-boat, the U-53, has just sunk a passing Allied freighter in bold, plain sight just miles from American shores. It is a brazen demonstration of the very weapon Lake is trying to sell. As the freighter slips beneath the waves, the reality of modern war arrives in Connecticut's front yard. The Sound is no longer a sheltered highway for commerce. It is a potential battlefield. This event catalyzes a hidden transformation. The genteel maritime economy of southeastern Connecticut is about to be militarized. Within months, the quiet village of Groton is chosen as the site for a new naval submarine base. The Electric Boat Company, which had been furtively building subs for the British, expands at a frantic pace. You can walk the newly laid streets of Groton and feel the change. The sound of pile drivers, the influx of thousands of skilled workers and engineers, the sudden construction of barracks and machine shops. The government money flows in a torrent, washing away the old, slower rhythms of life. But this windfall carries a moral shadow. The submarines built here in these pristine yards on the Thames River are instruments of unrestricted warfare. The U-53's attack was a shock, but electric boats vessels are enabling the very same brutal blockade tactics. The wealth is undeniable. It lifts entire towns, creates a new technical aristocracy, and firmly establishes the military-industrial complex in New England soil. Yet, the community is now wedded to the business of building machines designed for stealthy, total annihilation. The peaceful Sound becomes a testing ground for engines of war. Connecticut, leveraging its Yankee ingenuity, doesn't just supply the war effort. It becomes the central nervous system for America's undersea dominance, choosing a path of profound power and profound moral compromise that will define its 20th century. June 12, 1967. The heat rising from the asphalt of the I-95 construction site in New Haven is a visible haze, distorting the view of the Oak Street connector ramming its way toward the city's heart. You are not in the rural South. You are in Connecticut, the land of steady habits, and you are witnessing a quieter, more bureaucratic form of destruction. From the cab of a massive diesel-powered wrecking ball crane, operator Joe McNally watches his swing. With a sickening crunch of wood and plaster, another tenement in the Oak Street neighborhood collapses into dust. He is following the precise lines on an engineering survey, a map drawn not just by city planners but by decades of calculated policy. This is urban renewal, or as community organizers bitterly call it, Negro removal. The Oak Street neighborhood, a dense, vibrant, if poor community of black families, Jewish immigrants, and Italian Americans, is being systematically erased not by mob violence, but by federally funded bulldozers. The official reason is slum clearance and highway access. The result is the fragmentation of a community, displacing thousands into inadequate housing projects or pushing them into already overcrowded neighborhoods like the Hill, hardening the lines of de facto segregation. Drive now through the verdant, rolling hills of Fairfield County. The scent of freshly cut grass and blooming lilacs replaces the dust of demolition. Here in towns like Darien, New Canaan, and Greenwich, another wall is being built, through restrictive covenants in property deeds and the subtle, unspoken codes of real estate brokerage. A young black couple, Arthur and Jean Johnson, both teachers, inquire about a modest home in a suburban development. You see the realtor's polite, frozen smile. "I'm so sorry," she says. "That listing has just gone under contract." It hasn't. The practice is called steering, and it is as effective as any law in maintaining the racial and economic homogeneity of America's wealthiest corridor. Connecticut's great post-war paradox is on full display. It positioned itself as a liberal bastion, a home to elite universities and progressive politicians. Yet its cities were being carved by concrete knives, its suburbs protected by invisible fences of exclusion. The wealth generated by its insurance empires in Hartford and its defense contracts in Groton flowed outward to manicured lawns, not back to the crumbling tenements. The steady habit here was the habit of maintaining a racial and economic order through planning, policy, and polite denial. The violent unrest that would erupt in Hartford just a few years later is being seeded in this very moment, in the disconnect between the state's enlightened self-image and the grinding reality of life on the wrong side of the lines it drew with ink and concrete. September 20, 1991. The air inside the nearly empty Thatcher restaurant on Hartford's main street smells of old grease, weak coffee, and defeat. You slide into a cracked vinyl booth across from a man in a rumpled suit, his tie loosened. His name is Richard, a mid-level claims adjuster for Connecticut General. He sips his coffee, staring out the grimy window at the monolithic mirrored facade of the completed but silent 38-story gold building across the street. "They built it for the boom," he says, his voice flat. "But the boom left town." The lunch rush he once knew is a ghost of itself. Hartford, the world's insurance capital, is in the throes of a silent, devastating collapse. This is not a dramatic, single-event disaster. It is a slow-motion exodus, a corporate hemorrhage. Follow Richard after his truncated lunch hour. He walks past shuttered storefronts where going out of business signs are now faded. The grand old department stores, G. Fox, Sage Allen, are echoing mausoleums of retail. Cause is not a natural disaster, but a financial one. The commercial real estate crash of the late 1980s, coupled with the relentless corporate mergers and efficiencies sweeping the insurance industry. The companies that built the city's iconic skyline, Aetna Travelers, the Hartford, are now global entities. Their loyalty is to shareholders, not to Hartford. Departments are consolidated, back-office jobs are automated or outsourced to cheaper states. Take the elevator up to Richard's floor. The cubicle farm is half empty, a stark checkerboard of occupied and abandoned workspaces. The quiet is unnerving, broken only by the hum of a photocopier and the hushed, anxious conversations of those who remain, wondering who will be next. The corporate decision to hollow out its own headquarters is a calculated one. The city's tax base evaporates. Crime rises. Middle-class flight to the suburbs accelerates, stripping the city of its consumer base and community cohesion. Hartford becomes a case study in the late 20th century American urban crisis. A downtown of dazzling corporate citadels surrounded by a sea of poverty and decay. The wealth generated by the intellectual capital within those towers no longer circulates at street level. It is vacuumed up and distributed elsewhere. The city that once confidently ensured America's future finds itself with no policy to cover its own ruin. The steady habits of corporate paternalism are broken, replaced by the ruthless logic of the global market. Connecticut's capital is left as a stunning, empty shell, a monument to the peril of tying a city's fate entirely to an industry with no roots. The collapse of Hartford is not the end of Connecticut's story, but it is the moment the state confronts the fragile, often invisible architecture of its own modern power.